We're up and running. Those of you that are tweeting along, please do follow on Southwest Mutual or Tony Greenham as well on Twitter. But I've got a few slides to go through. So for this session, it was mentioned that we might talk about examples of practice around the world and stories that we could use to sort of vision what this new regenerative Devon could look like. So I'm going to introduce a few of those to you. And I suppose I'm diving down into a part of the system, which is around finance, Amanda having set the big picture scene there. So let me tell you a little bit about Southwest Mutual. But first, I just want to raise a question about money. So the question is, what is money? What does money represent? And I just want to highlight to you that there's a very strong narrative and framing and concept that we tend to have in our society about what money is. And I'd like to suggest to you that it's completely the wrong way to look at it. So if you look at literature, stories, films, books, Harry Potter, Treasure Island, so on and so forth, gold, money, it's all presented as a thing, an object, a thing that you want to hold as much of as you can. It's a thing to possess, money. That's unhealthy. That's a very unhealthy way to understand it, and it isolates us and sets us to compete against the other members of our community. But there's a better way of understanding money, which is that money is a social relationship. So money is something which facilitates exchange between us. Therefore, it's reciprocal. It requires mutuality and mutual trust to really fulfill its potential. I mean, money is not intrinsically evil or a bad thing. It's all a question of how we conceive it and how we use it. So my argument is that money should be mutual. Money is about mutual trust and mutuality. It's about relationships. And that has important consequences for the sorts of banking institutions that you really need to be able to express those values in the financial system. So what are the banks we do have right now? Well, what do they do with our money? Well, I want to tell you about a missing £1 billion in Devon. So if you look at what the big banks do with our deposits that we put into them, almost half of it is devoted to the financial system, trading, speculation, and so on. A lot of it goes to residential mortgages. Only a tiny amount, about £2 out of every £100, goes to lending to small and medium-sized enterprises. And actually, in most places in the country, SMEs deposit more into banks than they are lent back by the banks. And, I estimate that for the county of Devon, that means that our small and medium-sized enterprises are depositing £2.3 billion, getting £1.3 billion back in loans. That's £1 billion escaping from the Devon economy up to the City of London to be used for financial trading and other purposes. And some of it indeed is used for doing exactly the stuff we don't want any more of. Yesterday's economy, investment in fossil fuels. And where is the choice that people in Devon might have to use their savings to regenerate the Devon economy? Well, there are other worlds that are possible, and I'm going to give you 4 examples. The first is the story of the Bank of North Dakota. Now, why the state of North Dakota? Well, because actually it has a population smaller than the county of Devon. It has a population similar to just Devon County Council's area. And yet it's a state, one of the US states. And they founded their own bank back in one of the previous times they were suffering a real economic crisis. And because the economy was controlled from out of the state, local farmers and businesses couldn't access fair finance. There was a coalition of civil society and political groups that came to power and founded their own bank, the Bank of North Dakota. And that now is a major bank of almost $6 billion of assets. Right in the heart of supposed sort of nexus of capitalist economy is a state-owned bank that's very successful. So another scale, let's look at community banking in Chicago. There's an area in Chicago called Devon Avenue that promotes itself as the most diverse street in America. And this is an inspirational example of a bank, and its mission is diversity, respect, and service. So because they say that their mission is to provide the bank that the neighborhood demands, They tailor their services to what the area needs. And because they've got a very diverse population, their staff speak 30 languages between them. They've put on workshops in Assyrian. They've helped Russian refugees to settle. They provide different products for different faith groups across all of the rich variety of faith groups they have in that area. And this is a bank of 210 million odd deposits in 8 branches. And that's only the 130th largest bank in the state of Illinois. It just shows you what a rich fabric of banks they have in the States that we don't necessarily hear about. Interesting stories about community banking. So if you fancy perhaps a trip, let me transport you now to Switzerland. So in Switzerland, the canton of Bern has about 1 million residents. So again, similar size to Devon, one of the Swiss cantons. And they have their own public savings bank, the Berner Cantonal Bank, founded in 1834, assets of 26 billion and over 1,000 employees. They basically provide the banking for more than half of the enterprises, the small and medium enterprises in the canton, as well as many of the households. It's an absolute powerhouse of that economy. Finally, let me transport you to Japan, the province of Okinawa, which has 1.4 million residents, again, similar size to Devon, and it has its own cooperative bank. There are hundreds of these Shinkin cooperative banks in Japan, and between them, they have almost over 9 million members and a massive deposit base. I logged on to have a look at the website for Koyo Bank, Koza Shinkin Bank, and there it is. Anybody who speaks Japanese can email me later and tell me what on earth any of that says, because I don't speak Japanese. Anyway, so here are just some examples from around the world. Now, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Well, these are all examples of regional stakeholder banks, which are banks that don't just exist to provide profits. They are, how you like to put it, mission-led banks or purpose with profit. They have a social mission. They're social enterprises in a way, I guess you could say. And they all share these features of being led by a social mission, by focusing on a particular region, and by collaborating in networks in order to gain cost efficiencies and sort of financial robustness. And wherever you find these banks around the world, which is everywhere apart from the UK, you will find that they produce 5 benefits: financial inclusion, SME support, I've talked about that a bit, much more of people's money allocated back to the real economy. And very importantly, they contribute to reducing the inequalities between regions within countries, because it captures more of the money within those regions rather than letting it escape to the financial center. And finally, speaking to the theme, really, one of the themes of this summit, they make regional and local economies much more resilient in times of economic stress. On that final point, I want to demonstrate that to you. I was going to say I'm going to apologize for showing some graphs, but I'm not going to apologize for showing graphs because I'm an economist and I can't help it. So here are some graphs. This is showing what happened to bank lending in Germany after the financial crisis. So all you really need to pay attention to here is that there are 3 lines, because Germany has 3 different kinds of banks. It has the large commercial banks, and that blue line there heads downwards because they actually sucked money out of the economy after the financial crisis. They withdrew lending. But their public savings banks and their local cooperative banks carried on lending throughout the recession because they're there for the long term and they were more prudent during the boom. That's what happened in Germany. In Swiss, those cantonal banks that I mentioned, the same story. They were the ones that were there in the crisis, carrying on supporting businesses and local communities. And also they have cooperative banks in Switzerland that did the same. Japan, I mentioned that those Shinkin cooperative banks, they have other regional banks as well. It was those, again, that during the economic crisis stepped up to the plate, carried on supporting their regional and local economies, whereas the large banks dramatically reduced lending. What happened in the UK? Well, of course, we don't have these other kinds of banks. We are reliant on our 4 or 5 giant banks, and they all dramatically reduced their lending during after the financial crisis, which hastened and deepened the recession in this country. So part of what we're about is trying to put another line on that graph as soon as we can in the UK. And I'm just going to mention one. There are many sort of emerging approaches, I suppose, and some of them indeed have been around as long as E.F. Schumacher and Schumacher College, that emphasize how important a sort of more inclusive approach to finances. So this is from the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, CLES, their principles of community wealth building. And one of the 5 principles is about financial power working for local people. And this is all about how we don't have to wait for Westminster to tell us what we can do or provide us with the money or give us the money back that's been sent up there, if you like. We can reinvest the money we already have, as long as we have the right kind of institutions to allow us to do that. Wouldn't that be good? We could have much better power over our own economic strength. So this is what Southwest Mutual is designed to do. It's to fill that gap. It's to put in that piece in the puzzle that we need to build between us to have a more regenerative Devon economy. And here's our vision, purpose, and mission. They sort of speak for themselves, but I want to particularly speak to the final part, the mission. I mean, our purpose, which is permanent, which is effectively to help people to lead fulfilling lives and to flourish through providing them with the right kind of banking and finance products to help them do that. But very important, we also have a defined mission, which is urgent, and Jay outlined it at the beginning of this talk, which is the transition to a low carbon economy and to achieve that in a way that is socially just. So it is a very important part of this bank. It is designed to help to do that in the Great Southwest region. So we will serve not just Devon, but Cornwall, Somerset, and Dorset as well, in order to achieve the scale we need to be a fully licensed bank. But just before I finish off, a few more details about the proposed bank. It's customer owned, 1 member, 1 vote. It's a proper mutual cooperative bank. We haven't had, believe it or not, a cooperative bank in this country ever. The cooperative bank wasn't a cooperative, and building societies aren't banks. See me later if that sounds surprising, but I think many of you know that already. So our mission includes financial inclusion and a focus not just on small businesses, but actually the not-for-profit business enterprise sector, which I think is growing and really important. That's a priority sector for us as well. We think it's up to people to decide how they want to bank, so we want to have branches with actual human beings in that you can bank with, as well as state-of-the-art online and app-based mobile banking. Social and environmental lending, if we're going to achieve this transition, we want to help finance not just businesses, but people as well, to reach that lower carbon lifestyle or that lower carbon business model. We want to be there to help them make that transition. Reinvesting in the local economy I've talked about, but capturing some of that missing billion and reinvesting it back into Devon would be a pretty good place to start. We're not the only one. There'll be a network of these regional mutual banks. There's already Avon Mutual in Bristol. Northwest Mutual started up, spanning from Preston up to the Lake District. Northeast, based in Newcastle and Wales as well. Greater Manchester. So there are places around the UK where other people are forming these banks, and we will all cooperate together. And we're aiming to build something that's of a scale that can make an impact, a £500 million balance sheet. I suppose the only bad news is it's not a very quick job starting a bank. We will be fully launched, we hope, in summer 2022. But we are making our progress towards our banking license now and looking for new investment. So to finish off, we think that this is a distinct proposition, and it fits as part of I suppose, the principles of a regenerative Devon social economic system. You know, we're driven by purpose, we are rooted to place, and we're all about participation. So not just that our members control the bank, and there's an equality of dignity and respect because everybody has 1 vote, regardless of how much money they've got with us. But also we seek to work in partnership with other anchor institutions in the region to achieve our shared mission. Thanks very much for listening.